Well, long-awaited podcast guest. I've been trying to organise something like this for literally the whole 5 years of me doing it. Yeah. And it's only recently that I've had the balls to actually reach out to you and see if you were able to come onto the show. And I'm glad that we waited till now because I'm down in Melbourne, got a nice studio to do it all in, and we're on the road here, and got Lucy here from Armoured Angel. How you doing, buddy?
Here we are. Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, great pleasure and opportunity. Nice to meet you in person, you know?
Yeah, it's good. It's weird, like, in the days of the online following now, it's nearly like we've known each other for a while, but it's weird meeting for the first time in person, you know? Yeah. But yeah, look, it's also weird to say, like, Lucy from Armoured Angel, because I don't want to sort of, like, you know, attach everyone to...
It's more to me than that, yeah.
I've
done other things,
Yeah, exactly.
But
and first up, just at the top, because I know if I don't mention this, the Canberra Metalhead following that we have will be like, why didn't you mention it off the start? Everything we do in Canberra... all at some way, shape or form was because of the work you did in the early days of the scene.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So straight up.
Strong words. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Like I mentioned before, just before we went online, like on air, I'm just about to turn 30. So I'm that next generation.
Yeah.
So I'm not about to say that I, you know, seen you at fucking Metal for the Brain 2003 or whatever, whenever the last show, 4, I think.
I can't remember, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I'm not about to
somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'm not about to pretend I was, you know, part of that. But what I want to do is capture as much as I can so that people that were there can see the full picture now with podcasting. So
cool.
Straight up, just off the bat, I just wanted to say everything with all you know, Utopia and all the stuff you've done.
The earlier
even now, there's dudes in the pit wearing patches that you're still putting out.
Yeah. Still into it, you know. It's a passion. It's a lifestyle.
So
way of life.
Tell me, man, what was it like to come into the scene as it was when you started? In
real hard work
in metal.
Real hard work. Yeah. There were a few venues in Canberra. I know in retrospect it was kind of trying to build a scene in a city. Theoretically should have moved to Sydney or Melbourne where there was possibly more of a scene. You know, earlier on you had bands like, you know, Tyrus and SAS and Renegade and bands like that.
Yeah. In
the early sort of thrash scene. That was probably a bit later than Armoured started. We just couldn't find a drummer for years. You know, Rowan, the first guitarist, and I, we were writing songs for years before we could even find a drummer. Then we got a drummer and then found a vocalist. Couldn't get a gig. No clubs would have you. You know, wouldn't put metal on. They'd have punk bands, wouldn't put metal on. It was very odd. Metal had this very sort of rebellious, sexist sort of view. You know, so it was a real struggle in the early days. You know.
Shit. And like now you compare it, like I think that, so I've worked at the Basement now for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I've gone to other venues, and I feel like the crowd at the metal crowds are quite the opposite. Like as far as like the stereotypes of like, you know, sexism and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that was the opposite back then, but it was just the way it was perceived as even though punk was more political and anti-societal and anti-social, metal was sort of seen, I guess, as the sort of the bad boys or whatever. You know, it was quite odd, the perception. It was just so hard to get a gig, but you didn't really have the market for it either. So you know, when we did latch onto a couple of bands that we made friends with and got gigs with them, you get very few people over 18 coming to pub shows. But the underage, consequently, you were forced to build the underage show yourself, and we did a lot of that at the youth cafes in Canberra. It was even just hard trying to find somewhere to rehearse. You know, it really was. It was a real struggle. Warehouses, church halls, you know, scout halls, whatever.
Just rocking out with like in a church hall.
Absolutely, hiring out a church. We rehearsed and wrote a lot of our early stuff in in churches, but yeah.
Yeah, it just goes to show if you some people can turn a blind eye to what they believe in if it means that, you know, someone might sling them some cash to hire their hall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it led to a bit of conflict actually, but with some of the churchgoers occasionally, but you know. Yeah, that was probably a bit later on, maybe the late 80s.
Yeah.
Real early stuff, I don't know, we just had a passion for it. I was rehearsing with 3 different guitarists, I think, at the time, and we were writing and that, and none of us could find drummers to go with our styles of music, you know. Yeah. And, Rowan and I had probably written the most, and then we got Dave in on drums.
Yep.
And then finally, found Rick on vocals, and I think we did a gig at the ANU bar in 1985, was our first...
Jesus Christ.
First outing, but we'd been writing songs for years before that. So that was quite an experience, you know. Yeah,
that's rad. That's really good. Like a lot of those older venues, like I seen, I think one of the early memories of a gig at ANU would have been, and like I mentioned, I'm like after that era, wave. I went and seen a band called Stand Alone. They're like a punk band.
Oh, yeah, I've got their T-shirt. Yeah. The singer was a good friend of mine. He
cool.
was a big figure in the scene as well, yeah.
That's right, yeah. So I went there and seen that gig. I nearly got beaten up by punk dudes because I had a mohawk and, you know, it didn't fit with their thing.
Yeah, it didn't fit with the narrative,
Yeah, so, but luckily I was, because I was young, man. You know, like, people in the scene tend to avoid conflict and that sort of stuff, whereas I was Mr. like walk up, hey, how you going, fellas? Oh, I know that band, and I didn't realise that when you're young, because when I was younger I was sort of a bit more like talkative to people I didn't know, and normally I was fine in a metal scene, but some of the punkers weren't as much keen on that.
Interact,
so, but luckily enough I knew enough people there that sort of just like seen trouble arising and took me out of it.
Smoothed it over, yeah.
But that's a notorious venue for all that like early stuff as well as some of the late. Like I've seen a couple of other gigs there as well, but I remember that Standalone one just because of the iconic members. Like you had dudes there that used to be in Rose Tattoo and all that sort of gig.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But as far as things go for like that venue and music stuff, Metal for the Brain, we have to talk about it a little bit at least.
Sure.
I think what was just to correct what I was saying before, do you remember when the last one that Armoured Angel played was? What year?
It was 99. It was the last gig we played before the final lineup broke up.
Yeah, bloody hell.
99, yeah.
99, yeah. And that was... how long was that final lineup in before it broke up?
Oh, maybe 2 years in or something. Yeah, it went south pretty quick.
Yeah.
It was going really well. It was a force to be reckoned with, you know, and a few bad decisions and, you know, some personal sort of differences and you know, just exploded and
bloody hell. So so 2 years, do you think that was the best lineup that you guys had?
In some ways, I think other people do. It was it was firing on all cylinders early on, you know.
It clicked sort
pretty
of thing.
Quick, and I think a lot of everything's about chemistry, you know. Any type of interrelationship, you know, you can have animosity or aggression. Sometimes that can work and bring out the best in everyone, you know. There was a little bit of that with one of the producers, Jazz Coleman from Killing Joke. There was a little conflict there where he was trying to push us and that sort of animosity brought out the fire, you know. So it can be a good thing too, but the chemistry sort of, If it's there, it's there. If it isn't, it isn't.
Yeah, it's like that secret. Maybe a lot of producers know that it might bring it out, you know?
True, yeah. This producer fired someone up and then turned to me and winked, you know, knowing full well he was creating... getting the reaction. You know?
That's it. That's it's a bit like, so we mentioned briefly off mic, and anyone that listens to the show knows I pepper this little bit of information through most episodes. I do stand-up comedy, and some of my best sets are when like something's gone awry. Like I did a gig where like the mic kept cutting in and out, and everyone was having trouble with it, and some people it was just randomly cutting out on their punchline, and they were losing it.
Losing.
And I was just like, all right, and then I just like went in on it, and so many people were just like, the funniest reaction that I had was one dude was out the front, and I heard him talking to his mate. He didn't know that I was the one that was just on stage. All he could hear was the speakers that were facing outdoors, like it was like the outside smoking area. So he didn't see who it was; he could just hear
them. Yeah.
And he goes, I walk out and I just overhear him go, see, the thing is, he had an accent. He goes, the thing about Australian comedians is it doesn't sound like they're exactly funny. They're just rude cunts. But
it sums up the culture.
yeah. It made me laugh. But speaking of like, technical difficulties and issues with mics and that sort of stuff like that, I know that when like a lot of people have spoke about when you hit the road, you get some troubles and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Have you ever, in the time with Armoured Angel, and I know obviously sometimes this isn't all going to be on the forefront of your memory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any standout moments where like you kind of pulled something together last minute to fix a problem? It feels like a job interview. When do you best perform?
Yeah. What are your best qualities?
Yeah.
We had a bit of trouble actually at Big Day Out when we first played that.
Yeah.
So we'd played some big shows with, like I said, we really built the underage scene.
Yeah.
In Canberra, and then a lot of those people started turning 18, and then pubs started accepting metal, and then they saw the crowd and the drinking, and suddenly they all wanted, metal bands all of a sudden. We were lucky enough to score a gig book or a promoter or whatever earlier on. That was a good and a bad thing. Took us into the mainstream, and we got onto sort of ID Records, which was Polygram's sub-label, so that got us a lot of opportunities within things like Triple J and the Sydney Morning Herald and mainstream TV. So it all hyped. It created a whirlpool, like a vortex of hype within it. So we managed to get on the Big Day Out of that, and that was pretty daunting to walk out to 6,000 people. When you're a underground metal band, playing sort of extreme metal, to walk out to a sort of predominantly mainstream crowd, though they were alternative, they're still mainstream, and it was sort of the size and the space was a bit daunting. So we had some technical difficulties there with guitar leads and drum mics and this kind of stuff, but managed to pull it together and overcome the obstacles.
Yeah, that's good. It's like, I think that a lot of, like, I've seen a whole range of stuff. I'm not trying to, listeners, before you get the shits, just listen. This isn't me trying to tell Lucy about everything I've done. It's just giving some context. So I've seen, now let me continue to talk about everything I've done. So I've seen blokes fully refuse to play because something wasn't set up exactly how they wanted it. In which case, I had just started doing stand-up. And the promoter seen my comedy poster on the wall and recognised me as the bartender and said,
hop on and
jump on, do 15 minutes, keep the crowd warm while we set up behind, like the next band. So old mate thought he was going to get it his way. And I just jumped up and started telling jokes.
Filled in for it.
I told every joke I knew. It took me 15 minutes because I only just started. And because of that is why now they do... I've opened up a whole bunch of, like, for example, I'm doing a gig in Beechworth coming up, and that's because it's metal bands that want an MC in between. So I open up the floodgates to that. But
and someone that's like John the Beast used to do the same thing from
in the scene.
Someone from in the scene that relates to it, and people are relatable, and you can tell jokes in that vein.
Exactly. Like I can
the target market, the audience.
Exactly. Like I can relate. I can, like, one thing that one thing that I'll say is like there was the Strat and the Hat era. Like everyone had a Strat and a hat. Like there was like the acoustic people that have gone on to like a guitar and became like they want to be like a blues god. You know what I mean? Like that. There's different eras. So I'll always do that. I've done band interviews like on stage live. Like if the drummer's all set up and waiting, I'll pull him aside and do like an interview live on stage while the rest are setting up. Things like that. But I've seen everything from I won't play because it's not how I want it, right down to I've seen a guy try and like do a trick with his guitar, snap the lead off, so just the tip was sticking in the
jack of the
his
input jack. Yeah.
Grabbed out a pocket knife that was on his belt.
Yep.
And pulled it out, and then just grabbed. There was like a patch lead between two effects pedals.
Yep.
And he's just got down on his knee, pulled it out of one, and jammed it straight into the guitar, and finished the song just with like that, with like 6 inches of lead.
Yep.
Between him and the
guitar.
Yeah. So everything from there to there.
Yeah.
But like I was mentioning before, like interviews on gear and that sort of stuff. Do you have? First of all, do you still play any stuff like just messing around?
Yeah, mess around personally. I'm still sort of writing lyrics and poetry and sort of playing guitar and bass and that kind of thing. You know. Had some projects going when I first moved to Melbourne. But, the same old stories. People move on to get married, have a family, or whatever. Can't commit. Everyone's got to be at the same level for it to work. People come, people go. On that note, I will tell an interesting story.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably your turn to tell a story. Yeah,
to me, but talking about we toured with Bolt Thrower. We were lucky enough to get the whole Bolt Thrower tour.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, most of it, not Perth, I don't think. Played in Sydney with them. One of the best shows ever, one of the best times of my life.
Yeah.
Played in Brisbane with them the next night. They flew, of course, but we had to drive, so we were absolutely shattered and just made it to the venue as we were supposed to be on stage. So we had no sleep and driven straight from Sydney to Brisbane. There. Worst gig ever, it was woeful, just plugging into other gear.
What year was that?
94, I think it was, 93 or 94. But Damaged opened the show. It was in Victoria, and all ages show. It was a bit more rural, wasn't central sort of Melbourne or anything. Our roadie came over and had the lug nuts on my bass.
Yeah.
And the roadie came over and said, "I'll strap your bullet belt onto your bass," and he didn't click it in properly.
Oh shit!
And first came out, we had to count in 1, 2, bang, bass drops off because the lock nut's not locked in. Dropped my bass, so I've dropped down onto my knees to try and catch the bass, trying to play it. One of the Bolt Thrower guitarists runs over, comes over, locks the nut in, fixes it up.
Oh shit!
Play the show. So they were standing on the side of the stage and watching, and saw I had a problem and ran over and. Bolt Thrower were our roadies.
That's awesome, man.
It's a good story. They were the loveliest, real down to earth. We played with a few American bands, and they were a bit fucking arrogant. Know. But Bolt Thrower real down to earth. Real friendly. Sort of
awesome.
Running out and fixing up the support bands.
That's good,
gear
man.
Problems.
And normally, like it goes to show, like their willingness to help out and watch too, because so many of the headliners won't even watch the support, man. I seen Alice Cooper a few years ago in Canberra, and like some people don't even come out to watch the supports, like the audience. I mean, like like you got bands supporting Alice Cooper. I seen Ace Frehley as well, so I think he supported actually. Like a solo thing.
Love Ace's vocal.
Jumping out there doing a bit. But man, it's so cool to like that they weren't just watching but willing to help as well, man. I was actually really glad you brought that up because I was going to mention the Bolt Thrower tour. Also, did the crowd see that? Like, did they notice? Like, I know, like now, if I seen that, the crowd would probably get into it. Like, they'd be like, "Shit,
see the reaction." I'm assuming some did, but I was more focused on that
the thing.
So I didn't really, I wasn't really paying attention. But I'm sure, people in the front row would have sort of seen that. And
do you have a favorite sort of make, model, branding for strings, any of that sort of stuff that you usually go for?
I was always using the Roto Sound round wound bass strings, the medium lights. Because I had Ibanez Flying V, which I got customised with alembic pickups and a Carla tremolo system and Charla machine heads. So I customised that, got it repainted. The alembic pickups were great, and I finally found an alembic as well. Because both those basses had a really low action, and I was after that trebly sort of, Lemmy Motorhead, Kronos sort of Tom Angel Ripper sort of,
awesome.
Kronos Venom, Tom Angel Ripper Sodom sort of, that growly bass sound. I was using the lighter sort of strings with a Marshall bass stack. And I'd use a distortion pedal, and I'd always sort of a DI, so I'd get the punch.
Yeah.
And the bass stack was 2 quads, 2 quad boxes, so I wouldn't really have a lot of bottom end in it.
Yeah.
But I'd DI everything to get that straight sound punch, and then I'd mic up the quad boxes to get the growly distorted overdrive, and then mix those 2 sounds to get a real combination of them. Yeah.
Man, that's so cool to hear a breakdown on that. Because, the advantage of podcasting now is, you wouldn't have the chance to have that kind of conversation about stuff before, If it was ever on radio, it went out there, it was done. It never had much replay.
Too much technicality to it as well. It would be more, you get a bit more in depth. Yeah, the one big thing, Tim, a producer we used on the Stigmata EP and the Mysterium EP, he put my bass through a processor on Stigmata, so I think that really made that EP, was that bottom end bass sound. Wasn't quite the bass sound I was after. I was after more of a trebly bitey attacking sort of sound. Yeah. But he's put it through some sort of bass processor in Sony Studios in Sydney, I think it was, and it punched it. So, and given the feedback that, a few people, Mysterium's their favourite sort of thing, but most people I talk to, Stigmata's the one that does it for them, so perhaps it's the aggression of the songwriting. To me, Mysterium's a little overproduced, little clinical, little clean. Right. There's a reason for that too, which I can elaborate on.
Yeah, go for it.
So we booked a studio in Sydney, and we self-financed it, so it was all our own money. Yeah. We booked a smaller studio. We were there for, I think it was 7 days. I could be wrong. Might have been 4 or something that. Booked a hotel. Went into the studio, started setting up. Whole studio blew up. So we were unable to use it. We'd taken time off work. We'd all, put the money in, finance the studio. Back then, they were like $50 an hour or something like that. So it was a big deal, It was sort of a lot of money back in the day to use a good studio. And luckily, their biggest studio upstairs wasn't booked. And Midnight Oil had just finished recording an album there, and they just put a brand new $1 million desk in. Oh shit. And it was this huge warehouse drum room, and they said, while we're fixing the little studio downstairs, you guys use the big studio upstairs, because no one's using it. So I think that sort of added a lot to Mysterium, and having it released on Polygram Records sort of really pushed us up into the mainstream and got us on the Big Day Out again, and things like this. So it was pretty innovative at the time, it was pretty sort of groundbreaking. It had its limitations because we were signed to Polygram Australia. There's no overseas distribution, so what we were doing was we were getting stock from Polygram and then running our own international sort of distribution network, because we'd built that up with a few demos and EPs. Yeah. So a lot of time and effort went into that as well. Just running running our own. It became so much more of a business. You lost the time to do the music because you were too busy, sending out packages and answering interviews and all this sort of stuff. So, it became pretty overwhelming. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm sitting here man, the amount of interviews and stuff you would have done over the years and that, I'm trying to not sort of touch on the same sort of stuff. But like I said, being podcast,
got a different.
It's a different
avenue.
But look, what we might do, we'll take a break.
Yep.
I know I'll never cover off. I want to put this caveat here. I'll never cover off everything that everyone wants to hear from you. I won't even cover off everything I want to hear from you. Yep. we have time limits in, and because everybody's got ADHD these days, anything over 20 minutes they don't listen to anyway. Yeah. But I think that our fan base is very loyal to our content. So if most people are still listening now, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in. We'll take a break now. We might be able to organise something in the second part with a guest as well, something that I've organised as well. But I'm just really glad that we're able to have a one-on-one just to get this interview out there, because I've been, like I mentioned, looking forward to it since I started the show to maybe one day eventually have you on here.
Yeah, cool. It'd be great.
Yeah, so I appreciate you coming on to the show, and thanks everyone for tuning in. And
thanks for having me.
Cheers.